medium-term rentals, rent by the room, how does that differ from the long-term stuff that we do? All right, so good question. What's up, Capstone fam? Sat down with somebody this week who had a business idea, and I know a few others here in the Phoenix area that are doing something similar. There's a company called PadSplit, a couple others that what they'll do is basically rent it by the room, and you have a constant rotation of people coming in. There's pros and there's cons to it, right? And that's something that Capstone is not entertaining. It's not something that we will manage, but is it a good idea? Is it a good market? And is it well, not market, but is it right for you? Okay, so let me jump into it. I've got some pros and some cons to it. There's a few pros that I know, speaking firsthand with others. There's also some cons that I think are very clear, and it's a different model. And when people talk about property management, when people think property management in this model, some of us old schoolers, now I'm like an old schooler, we think of the long-term buy, hold, long-term holds, unfurnished, put people in the property, let them rent it out, let them pay your mortgage for you. Awesome. Benefits to that, less risk, right? You get one tenant in there for the year. Generally less wear and tear on something like that because you have just one family in there the entire time. These are things that are positives where the market now has shifted. So if somebody bought in, call it 2022 or the end of 2021, as interest rates started to change, especially in 2022, if they bought 2022 or 2023, it's going to be hard to make numbers for our model work. Their interest rates are generally higher. If they didn't pay cash for it and they financed, it's a hard sell to get somebody to come to this model because it doesn't make sense financially. So what is an option? Maybe this more medium-term rental versus the short-term, which short-term is starting to lose its luster to a lot of people as well because it's oversaturated. Of course, I'm all over the place, but let me get back to the point. All right, medium-term rentals. What is the value? First and foremost, you'll make more rents in most cases. You're going to have, let's say, 3 bedrooms. Cool, you've got 3 people now helping pay your mortgage. They'll generally pay more for those rooms. If you go onto a website like PadSplit, you'll see that they rent them by the week, and there's a constant churn of people, which leads to the second positive from that is you're never basically without rents, right? You'll have churn, but that churn basically reduces your vacancy impact, right? Which is then helpful on that end so that you've constantly got some income coming in. It definitely helps. It's also going to be more flexible with the pool of people that you can pull from because it's individuals. You've got one person who wants to rent your space for $200 a week, your room for $200 a week. You could pretty much put that out there to anybody, right? So let's talk now about more the cons. Like what are some of the issues with that? So of course you've got higher turnover. You got vacancy consistently, right? So it's regularly, consistently vacant. You're going to have more wear and tear. And that's something that not just on the property itself, but also on the grounds, and ultimately on the community. Okay, so this is one thing that I've seen firsthand is on these types of properties, you've got so many people sometimes in these properties that all drive. Okay, they all need cars. Well, in my house, I got a daughter who's not driving. Otherwise, it's my wife and I. So at the end of the day, how many people are in and out driving around and how many parking spaces do we really need? Ultimately, at these spots, you need the parking. If somebody's going to be parking in a garage and then there's people parking in front of it, how are people rotating? I can imagine that it would be more of a challenge unless you had properties that were very, very, very walkable. Also, once you have a lot of people around, that starts to draw a lot of attention, and particular neighborhood that you're in might not support that as much. Number four for that, well, okay, number three, you got intensive property management. So management for us, relatively set it and forget it. There are always issues that come up. Once we get the accounting built out, once we get the property leased out, the accounting is a constant, of course, in our type of property management. There's also regular maintenance, whether it's preventative or reactive maintenance. But we're constantly going to be maintaining that property. On that, I can imagine the turns. How often are you turning? Well, wow, that's regular. That's a regular thing. I would imagine that house cleaning would also need to be factored in as a part of the equation as well, which is just an additional expense. The other piece, conflicts, right? You get 3 or 4 people living in a house that don't really know each other. I mean, you're bound to see some stuff. I mean, I think that's how they make most of these shows on MTV, like Road Rules and all that stuff that I grew up with, right? It's like, yeah, you put 4 people in a house that don't know each other, there's bound to be some crazy stuff that happens. So there's the Road Rules piece to that as well. Okay, so let's talk about pros. The pros of long-term, where we've got the stability, right? We've got lower turnover costs, where we've got lower management costs, where we've got it's easier to find people for those types of properties and secure financing for that type of property as well, right? If you're going to be buying those, which is another piece of the equation for particular investors. I personally have not invested in the medium-term rental stuff. I had a conversation with a cool dude this week. He's got that business going. I have an opinion, and it was just like, okay, well, what about this, and what about this, and what about this? It's the whole NIMBY thing. Do you want one of these next to you? I don't know, like I don't, because it's a constant churn. It's a constant churn through people. If a rental's going to come to my neighborhood, I want it to be a long-term place, right? I'm super biased. I don't want short terms in my neighborhood, which there are. I don't want, medium terms, which there are. And it's like, okay, what makes more sense? But again, from an investment standpoint, if the numbers don't make sense for long-term, which again, if people bought and their basis is really high and their mortgage payment is really high, can be a tough sell to try to get it to a model like ours. Because again, unless you're ready to pay out of pocket every month, those numbers might not make sense. We're running into that more and more with people trying to figure out options if they're not able to sell right now because maybe the market is even close to where they were when they bought, and it's like a break even. They're not thinking about capital gains because they don't have any gains. It's like, wow, when was the last conversation you had with somebody when there was no capital gains involved? It's like, yeah, we're in that market. So cool. I hope this information helps, or at least is thought-provoking, gets you thinking about something. If you haven't checked out the PadSplit site, check it out. It's pretty interesting. But you'll see in Phoenix that there are particular neighborhoods that this works, and you'll see that it's targeted that way as well. So I don't know how I feel about that yet. I haven't really made a decision, but it's one of those things that I think is definitely something to keep an eye on and see how this continues to develop in the Phoenix market. Cool. Thanks for watching. Have a good week. Bye.